This is session 5 of Rivers revision for year 12. Just before I get going on river landforms, I just need to finish off my last blog. I was explaining how best to avoid mis-answering the question. The question I was looking at was soft engineering is a better river flood management strategy than hard engineering. And so far I've told you to make sure you spend time over the holidays learning your command word definitions, that you practice exam questions during the holidays, making sure you're underlining the command word. And I was just getting on to planning. So in a 15-mark question, you just spend a maximum of 2 to 3 minutes, very quickly, just laying out what you're going to talk about. The benefit of that is so that you can include key example sentences from your case studies rather than just case study information download, which really isn't required at year 13. In terms of your introduction, I always think that it's a very good idea to mention the command word within the introduction. This shows the examiner that you've got an understanding of the full demands of the question, and that you're about to answer the question. So if I was to answer that exam question, perhaps my introduction would read something along the lines of both hard and soft engineering are river flood management approaches. Soft engineering works with nature, while hard engineering often involves extensive modification to the channel or floodplain. Whilst discussing these two methods, I will demonstrate they both have both positive and negatives associated with them, and I will use key facts from the river gorges along the Yansky River and the River Eden in Carlisle to support my discussion. That's all that's needed. In that, I've given a very quick definition of hard and soft engineering. I've used the word discuss twice, which shows the examiner I've noticed that the question's asking for discussion. And I've also mentioned the two case studies that I'll be referring to. I'd be straight on then, and I'd be getting as many marks as possible for the advantages and disadvantages in the main body of the exam question. Just to make triply sure, I would then at the start of each new paragraph as I'm answering my exam question, I would in my head read the exam question again, just to make sure that for some reason I haven't got some other exam question in my head and I'm staying focused and I'm applying my answer to the demands of the question. You will find a full list of all AS command words on page 326 in your textbook. So just make sure you're learning them using Miss Pritchard's method again, and ask somebody to test you on them. Really important that you understand these, otherwise you're going to be wasting the time that you're spending on your revision. Right, let's move on quickly. Session 5, river landforms. So the aim of this session is to know what landforms that you need to be fully familiar with. For each of these landforms that I shall mention, you need to be able to produce a step-by-step description of their formation, and I literally do mean a step-by-step. It's a bit like a recipe of a cake. You can't miss out one step and then expect to get full marks. Assume you're explaining the formation to somebody who's not a geographer, somebody who doesn't know how a waterfall forms. They should be able to read your description and from that have a thorough understanding of its formation. You must always know a case study for each of these features, each of these landforms. You might be asked to include a labelled sketch diagram, so make sure you can do one of those for each of it. Again, you might be asked to describe the features of a landform from a photograph. Make sure you only write about what you can see in the photograph. Don't start to actually sort of infer information, only say what is there. And you also, with your landforms, need to know how they might change over time. So, upper section landforms are waterfalls, potholes, rapids. Middle section, you need to know meanders, including pools and riffles, and oxbow lakes. And then the lower course, you need to know braiding, floodplains, levees, and deltas. Each of those must be step by step in their formation. And I'm not going to go over them, but I am going to list them and say that the key terms that you should have included. So as you're practicing writing their formation, make sure you then check your responses against these key terms I've used. Waterfalls, words you need to include: hard rock, soft rock, erosion, step, band of hard rock, nick point, possible rejuvenation, friction, erosive power, undercutting, collapse, plunge pool, abrasion, retreat, step, steep-sided gorges, and I think that's about it. Potholes, words you should include in your description might include small circular hollows, abrasion, turbulent flow, bedload, circular motion, rubbing and scraping action. Rapids, you need to mention that they're often steep. You get turbulent flow, often sections of hard rock overlying soft rock. They might be described as mini waterfalls. Meanders, into the middle section, many key terms that you need to include in your descriptions here, some of which might include curve, middle lower section, erosion, deposition, alternating pools and riffles, uneven flow, turbulence, twist and coil motion, helicoidal flow, asymmetric channel, deposition, I might have said that one, oxbow lakes. Moving on to the lower section, you get braiding. Words that you might like to include in your descriptions here would include lots of erosion, sediment, often from meltwater, drop in velocity, possibly a load increase, deposition, dividing and winding. Floodplains, key terms would include overflowing banks, possible reaching bankful discharge, wetter perimeter, reduced hydraulic action radius, friction, velocity, silts, sands, deposition, layers of alluvium. Levees, key terms: natural raised embankments, overflowing channel, deposition, coarse sediment, loss of velocity, loss of energy, increased friction, heaviest material might build up first. I think that's about it. And then finally deltas. A description would include words such as energy, deposition, alluvium, sea level, possibly blocking the mouth, braiding, distributaries. The questions that have come up so far in the exams include those such as describe characteristics of a waterfall for 4 marks, describe and explain pothole formation, 7 marks, describe the formation of meanders, 4 marks, sketch a delta from a satellite image, that was for 4 marks, and then you also had to explain the formation of a delta for 7 marks. 2 of those, describe and explain potholes and explain the formation of deltas, as you heard, were 7 marks. Obviously that's a fair amount of the total river question, so I can't emphasize enough how important it is to know every single stage of the formation of these landforms, and 7 marks from the formation of a pothole would be difficult to achieve. So you need detail, detail, detail. One exam question we haven't yet done in class, and again it's an area that hasn't been tested, so it would be a very good idea if you tried this one and either emailed it to myself or Miss Pritchard, or bring it in on the first day of term and we'll get it marked. And it's a good way of revising. We would like, what was the question, sorry? With the aid of diagrams, describe and explain the formation of one fluvial landform other than a meander, created by a combination of erosion and deposition. This was a 15-mark question based on landforms. If I was choosing, I would perhaps choose something like a floodplain, because this has both erosion and deposition. so it gives you the opportunity to talk about both of these. I would start off by defining what a floodplain is. I'd then go on to describe its features. It would be an ideal opportunity to show the examiner that you understand meander migration and how that influences the width of a floodplain, because after all you are writing about floodplains, not meanders. I would explain how alluvium builds up, which again adds to the floodplain on each occasion. Geographical key terms I would like to include would be things like competence and capacity. These were mentioned in revision session 4 if you want to go back and look over those again. I would include diagrams, but I'd make sure that I've got detailed annotations to help with my explanation of the formation. Labels that I might include on my diagram could be things like a river cliff, slip-off slope, deposition, erosion, meander migration, the fellweg, direction of river flow, really important that one, future position of the meander on the floodplain, and possibly erosion on the outside of the bend. Right, I think that about finishes this session, session 5. One more session to go, which you will get in a couple of days. Good luck.